8:08.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russell Norman.
The big political issues with Russell Norman this morning. Morning, Russell.
Good morning, Wammo.
And first up, let's look at this Fonterra payout. A record payout to New Zealand dairy farmers was announced yesterday. I guess it's the preliminary payout, their forecast. But they still reckon that they can't afford to pay for climate change mitigating measures.
Yeah, that's right. It's quite extraordinary when you think about it. It's $8 a kilogram of milk solids. If the dairy industry was brought fully into the emissions trading scheme, the full cost would be 25 cents per kilogram of milk solids.
Drop in the bucket.
It's like within the margin of error because that forecast payout bounces around a lot during the course of the year.
Yeah.
So it's really marginal stuff, and yet still they don't want to be bought into it. I mean, even if you look at, under the government's proposal, they would come in 2015, but they'd only pay 10% of the cost, which is 2.5 cents per kilogram of milk solids, and even that they're fighting. So, I mean, it is quite extraordinary.
Are they projected to become part of the ETS at any point in time?
Yeah, currently they're due to come into the ETS in 2015, but only paying a margin, so 10% of their cost, so 2.5 cents per kilogram. And then over time, they're supposed to pay each year 1.3% more. So over a very long period, they slowly are drawn into it. And during all of that time, the cost of their emissions is subsidised, or it's paid for by the taxpayer.
I see. Okay. Now, I guess you risk being seen as anti-farmer when you come out saying stuff like this, Russell.
Yeah, there is that risk, but I mean, it's just a basic reality that the whole idea of putting a price on greenhouse emissions is to incentivise economic opportunities to reduce emissions. I mean, that's the whole idea of it. And the thing is, if you don't actually put a price in there, there's no incentive, there's no economic incentive. And that's what we're proposing to do. We're proposing to subsidise pollution to the tune of many billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's just stupid. I mean, we're subsidising our own destruction. What idiots we have to be.
Yeah. Well, while we're dilly-dallying over on this side of the Tasman, over in Australia, they've just released the Climate Commission's new report called The Critical Decade, which conclusively says the science is sound, and right now we're in a critical time. If we don't act against climate change, then we're stuffed. And that's report has come out from, it's a government-sponsored report into climate change. Nothing like that over on this side, though, is there?
No, I mean, the first thing the government did when it got in was to weaken the price signal around the emissions trading scheme. And so, yeah, I mean, we're going in the opposite direction because we think that having a high carbon economy is going to be a really prosperous thing to do in the future. That's certainly the government's strategy, which is clearly false. But I mean, aside from the issues around the price of carbon and making sure we've got a competitive economy, I mean, the bigger issue is that, we are changing the climate of planet Earth. We've got ourselves in a nice comfortable spot for the last 10 to 15,000 years, when our civilization developed. And we're destabilising that nice, comfortable spot.
Yeah.
And we're going to find there'll be, a different climate. I mean, if you look at the paleo climate, which is what's happened to the climate in the past, there's been times when things have been warmer, but the sea level's been much higher. So, a couple of degrees warmer, but 20 metres of sea level higher.
Yeah.
So, we might find a new spot, but it will require very, very significant adjustment when you think that most of our cities are within 20 metres of sea level.
With a sea level rise like that, you can forget about rebuilding Christchurch.
Yeah, well, that's right, and lots of other of our cities are in real trouble with that kind of sea level rise. So, it's just, this is the risk we're taking because we as a country and as a nation and as a planet aren't taking climate change seriously. We're not cutting our emissions. What
do you make of the messages coming out of the Labour camp over the weekend with their Labour Party Congress? They seem to be saying the right things. They want to smarten up the economy, make us high tech, and I suppose by default that means sort of green tech, and less of an emphasis on primary products.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were some good announcements came out of Labor over the weekend. They've obviously felt some of the pressure around some of these issues. And the Greens and others have been putting pressure on them, so they are responding a bit.
They talked about the holiday highway. They would scrap that if they got in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Puhoi to Wellsford Highway. I mean, I think it is important to say that that there is money that should be spent to make that highway safer because it is killing people. But building a brand new grade separated motorway is what the government's talking about, and that's a ridiculous waste of money. But actually spending money to actually make it safer, I totally support that. But yeah, I mean, I think Labor, there's some new blood in Labor, and I think they are managing to pull them in a bit more of a progressive direction than the last Labor government was.
Yeah. Russel Norman, co-leader of the Greens, thanks very much for joining me. I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
All right, Peter. Thanks so much.
Track now here from Chloe Bartlett. This one here is called